This is all in camera. This shot is entirely in camera.
Oh, so cool.
Where basically we rotated the camera. All we did was remove the wires. That really is him stepping off the stairs and doing that tumble. For us, we're trying to be super faithful to zero gravity as much as possible. We don't typically use the Steadicam as a zero gravity tool because it doesn't look nodal.
What is going on, Indy Mogul? My name is Ted, and today we are breaking into the cinematography of The Expanse, which if you haven't seen it yet is one of the coolest looking shows online. And to talk about this, we're talking with Jeremy Benning, CSC, cinematographer behind the show, and actually breaking into a couple of the scenes and talking about how the lighting and rigging actually went for each scene. Let's do this.
There's a planet on the other side of the ring. A group of Belter refugees has claimed it as their home.
Alrighty, so starting off with The Expanse, obviously a huge budget sci-fi TV show, but can you talk a little bit about how you found the visual style?
Sure. Well, I think in the beginning, the discussions that we had in the first season about the look and the feel was to have it feel grounded and real. We wanted to feel like a real place, that these were working ships. We referenced oil rigs, that kind of thing, and real working environments where there's grit and dirt. Some of these places are 100 or more years old at that point. So there's a certain baked-in age factor to them, and we wanted to make sure that depending on the place we were in, some are older than others, so we were very conscious of the utilitarian nature of the place. So what actually goes on there, how do people work and live there, and how old is it? Northfront took those ideas and made concept art that was with our production design team with Seth Reed in the first season, and came up with sort of this look and style, and that kind of informed me of like, how do we light these things to represent that feel. When we came to designing the lighting and the built-in lights, we kind of use those as kind of influences of like, how advanced is this technology, how much is the lighting built in. It's architecturally more kind of sculpted into the set, and that was a combination of the set designers and the art and the concept artists, and then me getting involved with them and kind of figuring out, well, how do we have to light the set from a just practical, we have to light it standpoint, but also that the lighting that we see when we see it in the shot like fits with that philosophy of that place. A lot of the light in the main flight deck is from the floor, and it creates this sort of little more serious kind of like ominous kind of thing. The Belter world was often more toppy, task lighting, kind of like lights that were stuck into the ceiling. Earth was a little more softer and gentle and kind of more side lit, because we had so many sets to conceive of that you had at least some starting point of, okay, well, this is Belter, like lean towards this method of putting the lights into the set. It's Martian, go, this way, and so on.
For the show, as far as picking the visual style too, what camera and lens package did you choose?
We started with the Red Dragon because at the time the Alexa Mini didn't exist. Because the Movi was a very important tool in the beginning that we wanted to utilize a lot for our zero-G work, the Alexa was too big. You couldn't put an Alexa on a Movi. Once the Mini had come out after season 1, we switched to Mini, and we've been with the Mini ever since. But our lens package has basically been the Cooke S5s. They're a little sharper, but not as sharp as Master Primes. They have that extra stop. For our show, being future-based, we wanted that really harsh crispness. A lot of our environments, we didn't use haze, which is counter to what most people are doing these days, because it would sort of betray the cleanliness of the space or a vacuum environment or whatever. So we made a decision early on to like very little diffusion in camera and almost no haze, unless there's like a battle sequence with fire and stuff like that. So that became our choice, and that just became the look of the show.
Alrighty, are you ready to jump into some scenes?
Yes, let's do it.
Be slaves. That's all we are to the Earthers and Dusters. They built their solar system on our backs.
This was our like big intro to Ceres Station, which is an asteroid colony. Basically immediately introduced to the aesthetic of the Belters, this sort of like bohemian hippie style of costume, a bit kind of mixture of different fabrics. And of course this sense of this real bohemian market. That whole sequence we just saw was like a long one take, going from one part of a set through a visual effect element, and then a technocrane shot that came down into this big market space to reveal Thomas Jane's character for the first time. There's the technocrane shot, and then the foreground elements are still visual effects, and then now we're fully into the technocrane shot. So once we get really low, the second level you see above the first level is all of it a set extension visual effects wise. So everything that's on the first level is real.
That's still an enormous set.
It's a massive set, and all those tunnels you can see going off into the distance were practical and real, and we had probably 200 or 300 extras. Any of the light you see in here, you don't really get a sense that it's the sun. It has to all be artificial. It's a combination of color and like neonness. I believe we had 2 or 3 12 by 12 like soft boxes that were all on pulleys that could be angled, and a combination of sky panels and like light tools, like egg crates on them, so that the light would only go downwards. We didn't want to light the walls. Then you've got these pools of hard light that are actually coming from like robotic, remotely controlled stage lights. That cyan kind of light on him is from one of those robotic lights. And then in the background, you can see behind him, there's like those kind of shapes that are lit up. We had a whole series of like Roscoe pads that we had basically custom made that were used to backlight graphics that the art department made. And then we were able to dim them to camera so that they wouldn't burn out, you know, so you could kind of dial them to the shot to make sure that you could still see the graphics and it wasn't like a hot white. I should mention, like, Ken Weeb, our dimmer board programmer, everything in the set is controlled by him. We would often have shots where, you know, you look one direction, you want to have backlight, he would hit the cues of like having one light dim down while another one dims up as the camera pans. So it was common. We would often have cues built in.
Okay, well, I think there's a good amount of built-in lighting in the next scene. So, ready to move on?
Sure.
Give me the word.
There's silent running mode, we called it, which is basically like where they've got everything off, so they're kind of like signature dark to, you know, being detected. So you see the ship, and then it goes into battle mode here, which is blue, which is interesting. Again, that's a Ken Weeb lighting cue on the console. And the reason for that is that when we did our research in the beginning, we found out that, you know, American battleships on their command decks, when they go into battle mode, they go blue. All the flashing light that's going on there is a combination of Ken making the lights in the set flash. Ken had this whole method of designing like Fritz patterns that we would save, and we could go back and recall them whenever we wanted to.
So when you first read the scene in the script, what did you know that you had to try to craft visually?
They're in helmets, they're getting shot at, so there's going to be camera shake. Reading the script, you're starting to think, okay, well, what are all the different lighting cues that I'm going to have to think of for this scene? The scripts are actually quite descriptive. They usually tell us when they go into battle mode. So this set has hundreds of lights in it. The set is filled with LED all throughout the walls, the ceiling, and the floor. Almost all of them are RGBW. So you can basically make any color that you want. We have like a default look for the Roci, which is sort of a neutral look. And then from there, we have our red mode, we have our blue mode. You know, the nice thing is that because the actors in this case are wearing helmets, their faces are lit with neutral light. If you don't have a white point reference, you actually start to lose the sense of the color. So if the whole frame was just blue or red, and there's nothing else in there that's white, after a while your eye starts to color balance itself and you don't see the color anymore. So we always make sure that when we go into these modes, there's something in the set that's still white. So the floor in this case doesn't change. And whenever we go into any color change mode, the floor always stays white.
Got it. Can you talk to me a little bit about those helmets?
So Jim Murray is our prop master, and his team did a great job. The thing about them is these helmets have an air system in them. So there's air so that they don't fog up. There's microphones in them. There's earbuds so they can hear. And then, of course, the lighting. We have the forehead light, the cheek light, and the chin light. And each one of those lights is individually controlled via wireless DMX. So Ken controls that on the board. The actors, in this case, when they're wearing them, they can't hear us on set because they're wearing this thing. And of course, they can't hear each other. So they have context with earbuds. The only way we can talk to them is with a microphone. So myself and the director usually have a mic. So that if we want to give them instructions, we give them it over the mic, and then they can hear each other as actors over the earbuds as well. It's a whole process. There's a whole props team and lighting team and a sound team that's dedicated to just handling the helmets when they come out. The helmets are such a thing. So Alex is basically by himself, and he's kind of like had a few drinks, he's singing to himself, and you can see all the empty cans floating around. For us, we're trying to be super faithful to zero gravity as much as possible, and getting out of a chair like he's doing right now is actually tricky. So he has to get up in a way that doesn't look like he's pushing himself out of the chair. Mikhail Solomon directed this episode, who of course was the DP on The Abyss and Backdraft. I have huge respect for Mikhail, and this was actually kind of his concept, having Alex kind of does a flip off the stairs here. And this is where he's on wire, so he's actually doing this pivot. This is all in camera. This shot is entirely in camera.
Oh, so cool.
That was basically a 3-axis lambda head, where basically we rotated the camera with him. So when he did his move, Jason, the operator, rotated the camera to follow Alex. All we did was remove the wires. That really is him stepping off the stairs and doing that tumble. One of our cues we use for zero gravity is we always have the camera nodally slightly rotating on its axis. You're not seeing anything zero gravity in the scene because the actors are standing with their mag boots on the floor. There's nothing floating in the shot. We want to make sure the audience knows subconsciously when we're in zero gravity. So anytime there's zero gravity, we just rotate the frame very slightly, like really, really slowly. So you're getting this real sense of like the frame is slowly turning. We watched a lot of like NASA zero gravity footage from the space station. We studied that, and you can tell when they're moving the camera around in there, if they let it go for a bit, you can really feel that perfectly nodal float. If you use a Steadicam as is, and you try and like make the horizons go off, it's not nodal because the pivot point for the Steadicam is actually down where the gimbal is and the lens is up here. That's why we don't typically use the Steadicam as a zero gravity tool, because it doesn't look nodal.
That's fantastic. Next clip, let's do this. Here we go. Now, the reason I wanted to bring this clip in here is because not all of the show obviously takes place in space. So tell us what's going on in this scene first.
So this is the character Anna Volovodov. She is going to the UN to have a meeting, and there's a riot going on outside of the UN in New York. So this was shot on a real location in Toronto, downtown, and we had a couple hundred extras, and this was basically an exercise in making the crowd look bigger than it is. It was like we had not a lot of time to do this scene, so the most efficient way possible was to use natural light as much as we could. So choose the direction where the light is nice, and time of day. This is kind of like a courtyard in downtown Toronto. We worked with what was there and added to it with our own set deck stuff. So like that lamppost you see is there, but the plastic kind of shield things are not. This is one of those days where, because typically we're a 2-camera show, but every so often we'll bring in a third camera. So as we're shooting the coverage of the scene, that third camera can almost act like a splinter and go off and just get details of the crowd. Think of yourself as a documentary unit, go and shoot this documentary style, and think of like you're at a riot getting news coverage. That's kind of your approach.
What is the key to making a crowd look bigger than it really is?
It's that whole cone of the lens, right? Of like making sure that you're putting people in that angle of view. Bring as many people close as you can, and then as they get further away, you kind of taper them in, so you're not wasting people off to the sides. The philosophy is still that the Earth is kind of still polluted. The skies are not pristine anymore. It's not as dirty as some of our space environments. It feels like Earth, but it's not clean, it's not super pretty, but it's definitely a departure from space and from our belter environments. And we tried to make sure that whenever we go to Earth, it's an opportunity for the audience to have a bit of a breathing moment. You're out of that claustrophobicness of our small spaceship sets and stuff. And remember, there is that contrast of Earth, that Earth is an open space. You see there's trees, there's green. You don't see trees or greenery anywhere in our space environments for the most part. When you cut to this from the other scenes, you're like, whoa, like we're suddenly like on Earth. In the flow of the show, this is really actually quite jarring.
Now, real quick, let's talk about Squarespace, which at this point everybody should be using to make their cinematography reel. You could probably get away with just having your reel automatically play as a video background as soon as someone looks up your website, which is actually much like the one that we have. So if you're interested in wondering how to do it, here's how you do it. Find a website template called Debut or any other cover page template, go to the Media tab, put your link to your reel under the video URL, and that's it. That's literally it. Now, all that's left to do is just choose from over 200 top-level domains that work for you. And if you don't believe how easy this is to do, you can literally start a 14-day free trial by typing in squarespace.com/IndyMogul, which will also give you 10% off of your first purchase of a website or domain. Now, you can find the link to that in the description down below, but thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this episode. And now, back to the episode.
So this scene, the tricky thing about the scene was it was shot in different segments. The Roci consists of multiple set pieces. The first shot of her leaving the cargo bay, that's a set piece, that's real. Okay. When she tumbles into space, there's a digi-double moment. So digi-double meaning that it's a CG version of her. But then the next shot where the camera's looking down on her, that is real. And
that's in camera?
The Roci, of course, that's CG, but she's really in camera. That's her on wires on a blue screen. The camera's above her looking down. Quite often we don't move the actor. We use the camera to move by them. So in this case, the Technocrane's actually coming down towards her and going past her. The trick about this was keeping track of where the sun was, because we shot this in like 3 different chunks. In the previous shot, when she leaves the ship, the sun is kind of coming from her left. This next shot was shot like a week later in our blue screen stage, which is a different place. The sun has to be in the same place, and it has to have the same intensity. We love using, again, those robotic lights. This is the VL4000 fixture. We use it as a sun source because it's super sharp. This shot of her tumbling is her on blue screen again, keeping track. The sun has to be in the same place as where it was on Naomi. And now she's spinning. So the main thing was like, well, she's spinning and she's got the reflection of the planet going past her and then space. So planet, space, and the sun turning around her. So we made sure when we designed the shot that we could have the sun be in a place that we could spin it that would not become a camera shadow problem. For that shot, she's actually standing on a scaffold deck, wearing the far out rig from Walter Klassen, which is basically a Steadicam harness with a pipe with the camera hard mounted right onto her. We had a 20-foot pipe with an 800-watt joker spinning on this pipe around her, so it's kind of to her left. And then one side of that pipe has the light on it, and the other side of the pipe has a bounce card. So there's two things are spinning, so she goes from hot sun to bounce from the planet, hot sun, bounce for the planet. And in that case, we actually took her visor out. So sometimes we'll take the visors out when we don't want the reflections, because sometimes we want the reflections and sometimes we don't. The planet reflection going by her is a VFX element, but the light changing is actually the spinning pipe rig with the Joker on it. This moment here, when they grab each other, that was her on wires, and then they actually do make contact. We shot that with them spinning sideways. So they're actually now hanging sideways, spinning like this. And then so they can actually grab each other.
Oh my God. Initially it starts off, she's standing still and the lights and the rig are moving around her. Right?
Yeah, so Naomi's flying, she's vertical, and the technocrane's doing that past her, right?
That's number one.
That's number one. And then Lucia, who's spinning, she's vertical like this, and the light's going like that around her, like this.
Yeah.
And then when they finally meet at the end, they're actually both spinning like this. Well, and in that case, the sun is now static in relation to them, but it has to be.
Oh, because they're actually moving. Oh, because they're actually moving. Now the sun can be
fixed. It started in a set piece, moved to a blue screen stage, and then done in pieces on blue screen. But it had to all match and all look like it's the same sun.
And there's helmets. There's freaking helmets in there.
And they're wearing helmets, and everything I described about the helmets before is going on there with the air system and the microphones and all that. There's points when you have no point of reference other than the stars in the background, right? There's a moment when they grab each other, when you feel the stars kind of go like this. And it's that sense of like they've grabbed each other. And remember that Naomi is still tethered to a wire. So when she grabs Lucia, she kind of goes like this because the tether has stopped. We always use blue screen. We very rarely use green screen. And the reason for that is because the blue spill tends to, if you have it on their clothing, it doesn't look out of place because it just feels like ambient space fill. As much as we can, we use blue screen. The way visual effects, our team figures that stuff out with the stars is really great because the stars oftentimes are our only point of reference of motion.
Alrighty guys, there you have it. There's your episode with Jeremy Benning, CSC, on the show The Expanse. Again, The Expanse is currently streaming on Amazon, so if you're interested in checking it out, go check it out there. I'll also leave Jeremy's information down below if you want to ask him any questions as well. Also, don't forget, we have a podcast discussion with Jeremy Benning. You can also find the link in the description down below. Check that out as well. One of my favorite podcasts of all time. Again, thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. If you have a show reel laying around, again, what are you doing? Make a website out of it by going to squarespace.com/IndyMogul. Also, for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So that's it for me, guys. I'm Ted. This is Indy Mogul. Thank you so much for watching. Of course, catch you guys next time.
One of these times when we did one of these things, a similar sequence, it was a day last year when I got a kidney stone.
Oh
my first ever kidney stone. And and it was like, it literally hit me the morning of going to work. So I had to, as I was being wheeled into a car to go to the hospital, I quickly wrote down on a piece of paper, like, the sun has to be here for this shot, and for this shot, the sun has to be here, because I hadn't had a chance to tell anyone that yet. But they did it. They did it, and I came back to work 2 days later.